What about the strong delusion in 2 Thessalonians 2:11? What is it? Who does it affect? When is it implemented? Why is it implemented? Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Lee Brainerd. Welcome to Soothkeep and another edition of Prophecy in the Crucible. My mission is truth, particularly truth in the prophetic arena. Truth at any cost, truth above every other consideration. This video is a follow-up of my video, Second Chance After the Rapture. First, we're going to review the deployment of the strong delusion. In other words, its timing and circumstances. Then we're going to focus on the derivation and development of the strong delusion. We're going to be looking at its nature and its essence, its progress through history, its explosion after God ceases restraining the mystery of iniquity. Many Christians miss the story behind the story, and we're going to go into the story behind the story. Let's start by reading the passage in 2 Thessalonians 2, 8 through 12. And then shall that wicked one be revealed, whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all lie-authenticating powers, signs, and wonders, and with all deceitfulness of unrighteousness in those that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Well, let's start by looking at the deployment of the mystery of iniquity, particularly its context and timing of the strong delusion. Notice that the order in this passage is the Antichrist is first revealed. Then the Antichrist works his lie-authenticating miracles. Then we see the men who don't love the truth embrace the deceit and the unrighteousness of the Antichrist's message. After this, then God responds and sends strong delusion. So the strong delusion comes after the Antichrist is revealed. So the strong delusion comes after the Antichrist manifests the full energizing power of Satan in lying miracles, signs, and wonders, to authenticate his lies, his deceit, his unrighteousness in political correctness, morality, economics, and even science. And yes, lying applies to all three of the nouns. So also we see that the strong delusion is God's response to men in the time of the tribulation, men who don't love the truth and embrace the deceit of the unrighteousness that's being spewed by the Antichrist. Notice the therefore. The King James Version says, for this cause God shall send them strong delusion. The ESV says, therefore God sends them strong delusion. The New King James Version says, for this reason God will send them strong delusion. And then NASB also says, for this reason. Now, if we pay attention to the timeline, we see that God sending the strong delusion is not contingent on men who knew the gospel, weren't saved, and missed the rapture. In the context, God sending the strong delusion is contingent on men receiving the blatant lies and unrighteousness of the Antichrist entirely without relation to the rapture. Also notice that the strong delusion here is judgment. Notice the language. Therefore, God shall send strong delusion that they should believe the lie, that they should be damned. In other words, God's attitude is, if you really want that garbage so bad that you're going to turn your back on obvious truth and light, then I'm going to give you a truckload of garbage. In fact, if you want that garbage, I'll give you a trainload of that garbage. Folks, this is judgment for believing the Antichrist. It's not judgment for missing the rapture. Folks, the simple revealing of the Antichrist at the beginning of the 70th week is judgment. The world rejected God's Messiah, so God's going to give them a false Messiah. And when the strong delusion comes along, the strong delusion is strong judgment. It sends men to hell. How is this not judgment? How is this not wrath? This fact is fatal to the pre-wrath rapture argument, which says the tribulation and the wrath or judgment of God are mutually exclusive. They have the tribulation over here, they have the wrath and judgment of God over here, and the two don't meet. But this treatment is a crock of malarkey, because right here in this passage we have God's giving of the Antichrist is a judgment, and God's giving of the strong delusion is a stronger judgment, a judgment that's designed to condemn and damn mankind. And folks, we also have to understand that the strong delusion is no threat to the saved, or to honest seekers, or to the unawakened. The strong delusion is aimed at men who wickedly refuse to receive the love of the truth. We can't view the bestowal of strong delusion from the perspective of men who are merely delaying submission to the gospel, or men who are merely wallowing in the hog pen. If we go down that path, then virtually everyone who misses the rapture is disqualified from salvation in the 70th week. And that is a boatload of nonsense. We must view the bestowal of strong delusion from the perspective of hardened unbelief, the perspective of the seared conscience, the perspective of the Pharisees claiming the miracles of Christ were wrought by the devil. This is the kind of unbelief, wicked unbelief, that we are dealing with. Their sin is not merely not believing the truth. Their sin is rejecting the truth as a lie and embracing the lie as the truth. Folks, the strong delusion is God's intentional design to sift the world. And God is not putting men in a place where they can accidentally wind up in hell, accidentally follow the Antichrist, or accidentally take the mark. God is putting men in place where they have to willfully ignore a great, vast amount of light and truth to go to hell. Bear in mind, the truth is carried forth in this dark hour by Moses and Elijah, by the 144,000, by hundreds of thousands of born-again Jews who are filled with the power of the Spirit poured out in a revisitation of Pentecost, according to Joel chapter 3. And on top of that, there's an angel circling the entire globe preaching the gospel. No man will be without excuse. And every man that rejects the gospel and rejects Christ and rejects the truth is doing so in as wicked a manner as any man has ever turned his back on the light. Well, let's move on to point 2, which is the derivation. You can't and you won't understand the prophecies of evil and apostasy and the Antichrist in the last days unless you see that there is a black thread that runs from Nimrod and Babel and weaves its way through history all the way to the last days. This black thread involves the seed of the serpent continuing down through human history, and it involves a raging sea of fallen ones and demons that are behind the scenes, fomenting the world continually into a raging sea. Now, the Bible presents the empire aspect of Nimrod's effort. We see this in Genesis 10, verses 8 through 12. Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went forth strengthened, and he built Nineveh in the city Rehoboth and Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah. The same is a great city. I want to point out here, though I'm not going to go into detail on it, that I understand the Hebrew word that I translated strengthened, which is the Hebrew word asher. I understand that is a passive participle of asher, which means to prosper or to be strong. I don't take it as a proper name for a person named Asher, and I don't take it as a proper reference to the nation of Assyria. Now, the book of Jubilees presents the apostasy aspect of Nimrod's effort. And there we read in 10:21 and 24, when they had finished building for 40 years, Nimrod in particular urging them into apostasy, they were confounded, being divided into many tongues by God. Nimrod continued dwelling there and didn't give up on the tower, ruling over a portion of the multitude. There's many ancient sources that we can investigate on Nimrod and Babel. When we do so, we discover that Nimrod introduced warfare, he introduced empire building, he introduced religion, and he introduced rebellion against God in heaven, or we can call that apostasy. If you want to read on this, the most popular book on the subject is Alexander Hislop's Two Babylons, where you'll find a vast amount of research on the black thread of Nimrod and Babel throughout history, but it has a particular focus on the religious aspect. And folks, by the way, extra-biblical research is biblical. We find the precedent for this in the Bible itself, where it refers people to non-biblical books like the Wars of the Lord and the book of Jasher if they want more information on the subject being discussed. The Bible was not given to us as our exhaustive resource, but our definitive resource. It's the resource to test all of the other resources. Now, when we look at the history of the world, we're going to observe that every false way in every century and in every nation traces back to Nimrod and Babel. And by the way, Nimrod means desertion or apostasy, and Babel, which is Babylon in Greek, means confusion. Babel is the historic seat of apostasy and the empire building spirit, and it is the historic seat of confusion in the world. Now, this power also molded the Assyrian and the Egyptian empires. And in the time of the Gentiles, the seat of world domination and world religion transferred to Babylon, then to Medo-Persia, then to Greece, and finally to Rome. Rome ultimately divided into two halves, and then each of these halves fractured over the centuries into many different nations and conglomerations of nations. This involved dozens of map changes over the centuries. In the last days, the little horn is going to restore the Roman Empire and gather up all these scattered and disparate nations that are the fractured pieces of the empire back together in a reconstituted Roman Empire. Now, the restrainer and the efforts of the mystery of iniquity have been going on in the world ever since Babel. The fallen spirits and the evil men that are working on the behalf of the mystery of iniquity have labored to bring to pass what failed to happen at Babel. And they've tried over and over and over again to do this. But God's restraining efforts have hindered every one of these efforts. All of them. Every time. But at the rapture, He is going to allow the dark powers that are working behind the scenes and the dark powers in this world to bring the Antichrist iniquity into existence. The upshot of this is that the Antichrist is going to be, for all practical purposes, the return of Nimrod. He is certainly going to be the fruition of what Nimrod was aiming at and what every great nation or empire since then has aimed at. Now, folks, I'm not saying that the Antichrist is literally Nimrod. I'm only saying he's going to come in the spirit and in the fulfillment of Nimrod. By the way, one of the ancient symbols of Nimrod was a horseman with a bow. Does that sound familiar? Let's move on to the third point, which is the development of the mystery of iniquity. What you need to understand is that there is a secret driving force behind the mystery of iniquity. As we already mentioned, there is a black thread that runs from Nimrod and Babel to the modern day, and this black thread involves not merely human beings as we know them, but fallen ones and the serpent seed. In the past 6 centuries, the dark forces have been primarily working through secret societies whose aim is to bring about the New World Order. And these Secret societies have an insane degree of influence on formal politics and economics. Now, the modern explosion of darkness, which is the modern emergence of deep iniquity, began in the 15th century with the rise of humanism, and it continued through the 17th century. This movement is also known as the Renaissance. This is the origin of modern humanism, which is the belief derived from classical Greek philosophy that man is the measure of all things and the focus of all things. This was followed by rationalism in the 17th and 18th centuries, also known as the Enlightenment. Rationalism says reason trumps religion and faith. Now, the concept itself is not flawed, but the application is seriously flawed, because this philosophy lumps God in the Bible and Jesus in Revelation under the heading of superstition and mere religion. And the purpose of the philosophy of rationalism is having liberty to pursue happiness without religious restrictions, especially the restrictions of the God in heaven and the Bible. Folks, this philosophy is unbelief. This is the unbelief we see in Genesis 4:16, where we read, "And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord." When Cain went out, he started the world that then was, and he and his offspring built the world, the old world, the world that perished in the flood. And the modern world is going out in the same spirit starting in the 1600s, and it is going to perish in the fire that comes at the second coming. Now, the third aspect of this mystery of iniquity in the modern era is evolution. Now, evolution has been taught off and on since the early years of Greek science, in 4 centuries or more before Christ. But evolution really came into its own, especially in the modern scientific sense, in 1859 when Darwin published his book on the origin of species. The upshot of evolution is there is no creator, and there is no creation. Everything that is came into existence through evolution. Now, the fourth aspect of the mystery of iniquity in our present modern era is public education. Public education is bringing the first three aspects, which are a threefold cord from hell, into every home. So the public education is bringing in humanism, it's bringing in the rationalism, and it's bringing in evolution. And this three-strand cord is basically, the church now in the world is like a frog in a pot. This is slowly and subtly increasing the temperature until the frogs are boiled to death. Now, the most recent developments in the mystery of iniquity include modern music like rock, pop, and rap. It includes Hollywood and every form of media. These three things, like a wicked trinity, are advancing the cause of the Babylonian agenda in America. But they're not alone. The Wall Street in the corporate world, big tech, big food, big ag, big pharma, they have all embraced the New World Order agenda. And modern medicine is going down the New World Order path in embracing the Babylonian agenda. Education at every level, from kindergarten to advanced education, is shoving the Babylonian agenda down the throats of their students. And every branch of government, including the Pentagon and the informal government in the military-industrial complex, and the FBI, and the CIA, and the NSA, and Homeland Security, and the ATF, they're all dominated by New World Order men. There isn't one significant aspect of society that isn't currently dominated by the Babel agenda. Folks, we are close to the end of the age and the rapture of the church. Now, this brings us to the lie. In 2 Thessalonians 2:10 and 11, we read, "Because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved, God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie. In Romans 1:25 we read, "Who men changed the truth of God into the lie and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever." The truth is, there is a all-powerful, all-knowing, loving Creator and Redeemer. The lie is evolution, where the most awesome thing in the universe is the universe. And the most awesome beings are evolved beings with godlike qualities. The lie, in other words, is worshiping and serving creation and created beings. Now, the great delusion is going to bring the lie of evolution to mankind in a way that's evolution on steroids. The lie in its final iteration will be the most sophisticated version of idolatry in history, because the great delusion is going to take humanism, rationalism, and evolution to new heights. This is no longer a mere mechanical evolution, but an extremely religious version of evolution. This is evolution where beings have ascended to godlike status in the universe, and these gods are believed to have seeded the planet Earth and guided evolution down here. These gods are going to return to Earth to guide men and to protect men from the coming invasion of the bad gods. And Satan is going to be worshipped in the time of the tribulation as the ascended master from another world. And the Antichrist is going to be worshipped as the first human being to become an ascended master, the first human being who's able to access and harness the powers of the universe. In conclusion, the church is being hemmed in on every side by the mystery of iniquity. It reminds me of the ancient hunt, when hunters on horseback would surround a herd of animals and tighten the circle until there was no place for the animals to run, and then they would slaughter the terrified animals. In a very similar way, the circle of the mystery of iniquity is tightening around the church. And when we are on the verge of disaster, boom, the rapture is going to happen. In the meantime, we do see the foundation and the run-up and the build-up of the strong delusion that is going to come in the 70th week, but we don't see the strong delusion itself. We definitely see the mystery of iniquity that arose in Babylon working around us, and it definitely affects the church, but we're not going to see the fruition of the mystery of iniquity. Folks, we are not going to see the Antichrist or the 70th week, so we can't possibly see the strong delusion in its fruition, its full form. Eyes wide open, brain engaged, heart on fire. See you next time.